The first thing I felt when I came back to life was the cold ring of condensation beneath my fingers. Not the hospital blanket from the bed, where I died. Not the dry, cracked feeling in my mouth after the fever took my voice. Not the nurse saying she was severely dehydrated when she came in, as if dehydration had simply happened to me and not been practiced on me years earlier in an exam hall. Just my water bottle, clear plastic, half full, capped tightly, sitting on the top right corner of desk 19 in the old summer examination room at Bellwether College. A blue external sticker sealed the cap to the bottle neck. Candidate 51. Approved hydration. Do not empty, without external supervisor. My name was printed on the label beneath it. Nina Ardent. The clock above the invigilator table read 12:47 p.m. The final synthesis section of the Aurelia Civic Scholarship exam would begin in 8 minutes. Outside the tall windows, the January heat shimmered above the courtyard bricks. Inside, the ceiling fans turned with the laziness of things that had never had to save anyone. In my first life, Mrs. Celine Vale, Scholarship Welfare Coordinator, Assessment Deputy, and mother of the girl whose final section always bloomed when other students wilted, stopped beside my desk and whispered, "Empty it, Nina." A capped bottle still counts as liquid risk near answer booklets. I emptied it. By the last 30 minutes, my head rang, my vision narrowed, and I missed the question that should have won me the scholarship. Her daughter, Isabel Vale, wrote coolly to the end and won by 1 mark. Years later, after I became the kind of school safety officer who measured room temperatures before anyone could call discomfort character building, I died during a heatwave evacuation when a locked gym corridor trapped students and staff in air that felt like breath from an oven. My last thought, as my knees folded and someone shouted for water, was not noble. It was simple and furious. Keep the bottle capped. Then the examination room returned. The blue seal was whole, and Mrs. Vale was walking toward me with her clipboard held against her chest. A water bottle should not be a weapon. It should be the most ordinary object in a room full of fear. Clear plastic, screw cap, condensation, a little slosh when nervous hands move too quickly. But in exam rooms, ordinary things become procedural if someone powerful needs them to. Bellwether's scholarship regulations allowed clear water bottles under strict conditions. No labels except candidate labels, no writing, no colored liquids, cap kept on unless drinking, bottle placed away from booklets, external inspection before entry. That summer, because the old examination room had unreliable cooling, candidates with prior heat sensitivity notes or medical hydration plans were allowed an externally sealed bottle. Mine had been checked at 8:12 by Mr. Harrow, the external supervisor. He read my name, checked the clear water, sealed the cap with the blue sticker, and said, "Keep this bottle capped on your desk. Drink when needed." No internal staff should ask you to empty or surrender it without external approval. I heard him. I nodded. In my first life, I still let Mrs. Vale make the bottle sound like misconduct. My name was Nina Ardent, and I had grown up in a house where heat was not poetic. Heat was rent saved by not running the fan. Heat was my mother coming home from aged care kitchen shifts with her hair damp under the hairnet. Heat was my father's delivery van with broken air conditioning and a towel over the steering wheel because the vinyl burned his hands. Heat was my little sister Mara lying on the kitchen tiles during January afternoons because they stayed cool longer than the couch. Heat was not laziness, weakness, or a lack of discipline. It was a condition you respected or it took something from you. I learned early to carry water, to notice when dizziness began behind the eyes, to eat salt before long days, to sit down before my body made the decision for me. My mother called it being sensible. Bellwether called it an accommodation, which is the word institutions use when they want basic safety to sound like a favor. The Aurelia Civic Scholarship was worth more than money, though money mattered enough that pretending otherwise would be insulting. Full final year tuition, a university mentor in public administration, a placement with the City Climate Resilience Office, a recommendation letter from the external civic panel. The final exam lasted 4 hours and tested source analysis, policy design, ethical objection, and final synthesis. That year's case file concerned a city council deciding whether to close public cooling centers during budget cuts and replace them with an app-based heat safety awareness campaign. The irony was so thick, even the fans seemed embarrassed. We were writing about heat policy in a room that had been measured at 31 degrees before noon. The final synthesis asked whether the city could ethically shift from physical cooling spaces to digital warnings for vulnerable communities. I knew the answer in my bones. Information is not shelter. An alert is not shade. A message telling people to drink water is not water. Mrs. Celine Vale had built an entire career on making harm sound like standards. She had pale blonde hair twisted into a low knot, soft beige suits, pearl earrings, and the kind of voice that made students apologize for needing things. She chaired student welfare reports, oversaw scholarship logistics, and gave assemblies about resilience in a tone so gentle it made refusal look rude. Parents adored her because she remembered allergies, extension plans, family illnesses, transport issues. Students feared her because remembering those details meant she knew exactly which ones to press. Her daughter, Isabel Vale, was Bellwether's civic favorite. Polished, composed, always hydrated, always rested, always appearing at debate finals with a fresh blazer and a calm smile. Isabel was clever. That mattered. But she did not think well under real discomfort. In practice papers, she performed best in perfect rooms. Cool air, clean desk, quiet clock. If the conditions became uneven, her mother found ways to call the unevenness character building for everyone else and well-being support for Isabel. In my first life, the exam began badly before it became disastrous. The room was too hot by Section B. One fan near the back rattled instead of turning. 2 students asked if the windows could be opened wider. Mrs. Vale said outside noise would affect concentration. Mr. Harrow logged the room temperature and requested portable fans, but the school facilities officer said they were being used for the assembly hall. The external panel allowed hydration breaks at desks, but only for candidates with approved bottles. Mine sat capped beside my booklet, a little island of sense. I used it carefully. 1 sip after Section A, 2 after Section B. Cap on immediately. By 12:47, I was tired but clear. Section D had gone well. The late source insert showed that the council's app campaign excluded elderly residents without smartphones, renters in overcrowded housing, outdoor workers, and families who used cooling centers not only for temperature, but for supervised safety checks. Section E was where I could bring the entire argument together. Digital warnings could supplement physical cooling centers, but replacing them would abandon precisely the people most likely to die unseen. Mrs. Vale reached my desk before Section E began. She did not look like a villain. That is the dangerous part. She looked worried. "Nina," she whispered, "we need to address the bottle." I looked down. It was approved. Yes, but the cap seal is sweating. It's condensation. Moisture near answer booklets can create skin damage. My hand moved toward the bottle instinctively. The cap was tight, the blue seal intact. I can move it farther right. The safest option is to empty it now. My mouth went dry just hearing the words. Empty it. You have had enough by now. Enough. As if thirst were a quota, she could assess from the aisle. Mr. Harrow said to keep it. Mr. Harrow is thinking about rule compliance. I am thinking about your booklet being scannable. She tilted her head, sympathetic. Empty it, Nina. A capped bottle still counts as liquid risk near answer booklets. I hesitated. My body knew the room was too hot. My mind knew the bottle was approved. My fear knew Mrs. Vale had power over more than a bottle. She leaned closer. Your bursary renewal is still pending. Your mother's catering contract with Bellwether has not been finalized. Mara's literacy support place is on my welfare list. A student in your position cannot afford a materials incident. In your position, the room always changed temperature when someone said that. If the booklet scans poorly, she continued, people will ask why you insisted on keeping water at the desk. I looked at the blue seal. The bottle was cold. My throat hurt. There is a sink near the side door, she said. Quickly. Before Section E begins. In my first life, I obeyed. I carried the bottle to the side sink, peeled the seal because emptying it required breaking it, and poured the water down the drain. The sound was louder than it should have been. A clean, rushing sound. My own safety leaving the room. Mrs. Vale watched from the aisle and wrote something on her clipboard. "Better," she said when I returned with the empty bottle. The word followed me back to desk 19 like a curse. Section E began at 12:55. The first 10 minutes were fine. Then the heat found me. It always starts politely. A pulse behind the eyes, a heaviness under the tongue, the page seeming brighter than before. I kept writing. I argued that cooling centers were not merely information points but physical infrastructure, social check-in sites, and emergency contact hubs. Then the letters blurred. I lost my place in the late insert. I repeated a sentence. My pen slipped. The last question asked for 2 safeguards if the council insisted on a hybrid app and center model. I wrote one. I knew the second. Mandatory physical outreach teams during heatwave alerts. I could not hold it long enough to write. My final paragraph thinned into vague language about community support. Isabel's answer, I later learned, included the outreach teams. Of course it did. Her mother had built the practice drills around that exact safeguard. She won by 1 mark. My appeal failed because Mrs. Vale's note said candidate 51 voluntarily emptied bottle due to concern about condensation near booklet. Voluntarily. Concern. Condensation. 3 words that made dehydration look like tidiness. Mr. Harrow had not seen the instruction. The room temperature log was acknowledged but deemed not outside operational range. My mother read that phrase aloud at the kitchen table and laughed once, not because it was funny, but because anger sometimes exits through the wrong door. Operational range. For whom? The exam had asked that question about the city. The school had refused to answer it about the room. The first life after that narrowed around heat. My bursary reduced. My mother's catering contract did not renew. Mara waited months for literacy support and began pretending she liked being quiet. I left Bellwether before final year and finished elsewhere, still good at policy, still furious about rooms where discomfort was distributed like punishment. I became a school operations assistant, then a safety officer, then a consultant who assessed exam conditions, evacuation plans, hydration policies, room temperatures, disability accommodations, and the lies adults tell when they call unsafe conditions real-world preparation. I carried a thermometer in my bag. People laughed. Then rooms failed inspections. I died during a heatwave evacuation at a sports center used for summer exams. The air conditioning failed before noon. Staff opened doors too late. A fire alarm triggered after a power fault in the old gym corridor, and the evacuation route sent students through a passage where the emergency door had swollen in its frame from heat and humidity. I was there auditing conditions and had already flagged the temperature. When the alarm sounded, I helped move students toward the secondary exit, but the crowd slowed at the jammed door. Heat pressed down. A girl near me fainted. I knelt to help her, gave her my water, and shouted for the side gate key. Someone said the key was with facilities. Facilities was outside. My vision narrowed. My legs went weak. I remember the plastic bottle rolling away empty. My last thought was not regret. It was instruction. Keep the bottle capped. Then desk 19 returned, and the blue seal was still whole. This time, before Mrs. Vale reached me, I made the bottle part of the record. At 12:43, I raised my hand. Mr. Harrow walked over, face already shiny from the heat. Candidate 51? Can you confirm my water bottle remains approved for Section E? He checked the blue seal, the candidate label, the position on my desk, and the hydration log. Approved. Kapintact. Bottle positioned away from booklet. Can you note that I should not empty it unless you instruct me? His expression sharpened. Yes. He wrote, 12:43, candidate 51 hydration bottle intact, cap seal unbroken, candidate instructed to retain bottle. Then he placed a tiny blue witness on the desk beside the bottle. Drink when needed. Keep it capped otherwise. Thank you. I meant it more than he knew. Mrs. Vale arrived at 12:47. Same beige suit. Same pearl earrings. Same soft concern. Her eyes went to the witness. There it was, the pause. Tiny. Fatal to the illusion. Nina, she whispered. We need to address the bottle. Mr. Harrow just confirmed it. Her smile stayed. I can see you are anxious about it. I am careful about it. The cap seal is sweating. Condensation is not leakage. Moisture near answer booklets can create skin damage. The bottle is positioned away from the booklet. The safest option is to empty it now. No, my voice was quiet. The word did not move. Her eyes cooled. Nina. No. You have had enough water by now. You do not know that. Do not be dramatic. Do not ask me to give up an approved hydration accommodation. A student at the next desk stopped writing. Mrs. Vale noticed. Her hand tightened around the clipboard. A capped bottle still counts as a liquid risk. Then Mr. Harrow can say that. Do not make this procedural. It already is. She leaned closer. Your bursary is not in this bottle. Your mother's contract is not in this bottle. Mara's welfare support is not in this bottle. You are making yourself look difficult. I am keeping myself conscious. That sentence landed harder than I expected. The air around the desk seemed to tighten. She reached toward the bottle, not grabbing, just 2 fingers moving toward the cap, as if she meant to inspect the seal. I placed my palm around the bottle neck without breaking the sticker. Please don't touch my approved materials. Her mouth tightened. It is water, Nina. It is logged. I raised my hand. Mr. Harrow?
The room heard me. Of course it did.
Heat makes silence brittle. Mr. Harrow came over quickly. Issue. I said clearly. Mrs. Vale is instructing me to empty my approved water bottle before Section E. He looked at her. Why? Condensation risk. Bottle is capped and positioned away from booklet. The room is warm. Moisture. The room temperature is the larger concern. That sentence changed the room. Mrs. Vale's smile thinned. Mr. Harrow looked at his thermometer strip, then wrote something on his log. Candidate 51 retains bottle. Then, louder, to the room. All approved hydration candidates may keep bottles capped on desks. Drink as needed. Report dizziness immediately. That was the first crack. Not dramatic. Practical.
Public.
Other students looked at their bottles. A few raised hands. One boy near the back asked if the windows could be open wider. Mr. Harrow requested additional fans again. Mrs. Vale stood beside my desk, hand still hovering, and withdrew it slowly. Her fingers curled around the clipboard. For the first time, I saw a tremor in them. Not large. Not fear yet. Anger trying to pass through control. Section E began. I drank before opening the booklet. 2 small sips, cap back on, seal already broken by authorized use, but still attached across the cap edge, bottle upright on the witness. The water was not magic. It did not make the room cool. It simply kept my body from becoming the exam's hidden obstacle. I wrote steadily. Paragraph 1. Physical cooling centers are infrastructure, not optional services. Paragraph 2. App warnings fail residents without smartphones, language access, stable housing, or trust in government messages. Paragraph 3. Cooling centers also function as welfare checkpoints, charging stations, medical observation sites, and safe public rooms for people whose homes become heat traps. Paragraph 4. A hybrid model is ethical only if physical centers remain open in high-risk zones. Outreach teams visit isolated residents. Public transport to cooling sites is funded, and digital metrics include people reached offline. Final sentence. A heat policy that tells people to seek water while removing the place where they can safely drink it is not efficiency. It is abandonment with notifications turned on. I finished with 6 minutes left. Not because the section was easy. Because I did not have to fight my own body for each line. Across the room, Isabel Vale kept writing too, but for the first time, she did not look serene. The public challenge over hydration had shifted the room's mood. Her mother could not stand beside her without looking like the welfare coordinator who had just tried to remove water from another candidate. Isabel's final answer, I later learned, stayed polished but cautious. She did not accuse the policy strongly enough. She wrote as if heat were a communication problem. Mine wrote as if heat could kill. The review began with scoring and became something else when Mr. Harrow submitted his room condition log. Temperature at 8:20, 28.9 degrees. At 10:30, 30.7. At 12:45, 32.1. Facilities request denied twice. Hydration retention confirmed. Attempted bottle emptying instruction by Internal Welfare Coordinator. Professor Lale, the external civic policy judge, asked for the welfare accommodation notes. That was when Mrs. Vale's hands began to tremble properly. Through the glass wall of the review room, I saw it. Her clipboard resting on the table, her right hand over the page, fingers shaking hard enough to make the corner flutter. The notes showed more than one attempt. A draft irregularity form created at 12:39 from Mrs. Vale's account read, Candidate 51 bottle condensation may affect booklet. If emptied voluntarily, hydration accommodation considered self-managed. Self-managed. Another note in Isabel's preparation folder read, if heat room holds, synthesis should emphasize calm implementation. Nina tends to overstate physical center necessity when fatigued. When fatigued. Not if. When. My mother, who had arrived after my message, kept bottle. Vale tried. Review happening. Come if you can. Stood beside me in the corridor still wearing her catering apron and whispered, she planned for you to fade. My father's jaw tightened. Mara held my sleeve. The formal review room was colder than the exam hall, because of course it was. Important adults often discover air conditioning when the discomfort belongs to them. Mrs. Vale sat across from us with Isabel beside her. Her hands were folded now, but the tremor remained in the fingertips. Professor Lale projected the temperature log, the hydration note, the draft irregularity form, and Isabel's preparation note. Mrs. Vale, she said, why did you instruct Candidate 51 to empty an approved hydration bottle in a room logged above 32 degrees? Mrs. Vale smiled faintly. I was concerned about booklet integrity. The external supervisor had confirmed bottle placement. Condensation can spread. Was there visible leakage? Not yet. Not yet. Silence. Professor Lale clicked to the draft form. Why was this drafted before you approached the candidate? Mrs. Vale's hands tightened, then trembled again. We prepare templates for possible incidents. Why Candidate 51 specifically? She had an accommodation. The note says if emptied voluntarily, hydration accommodation considered self-managed. Why were you preparing to classify the loss of water as voluntary? Mrs. Vale's mouth opened, closed. Her hands shook harder now, the clipboard edge tapping softly against the table. Top, top, top. It sounded almost like the ceiling fans in the exam hall, lazy and useless. Isabel spoke before her mother could recover. I knew Mum thought Nina would fade in Section E, she said. Her voice was quiet but clear. Mrs. Vale turned. Isabel. No, she looked at me, then at the table. I heard her say the heat would make your answer too emotional if you didn't keep drinking. I didn't know she would tell you to empty the bottle.
Honest. Ugly.
Useful. But I knew she didn't want you clear at the end. The room held that sentence. Mrs. Vale's hands finally stopped trembling because she pressed them flat against the table. That did not make her look calm. It made her look caught. The decision came that evening. My Section E score placed first. Isabel placed second after blind external moderation. Mrs. Vale was removed from scholarship welfare duties, pending misconduct review. The official findings stated that she attempted to induce a candidate to empty an approved hydration bottle during high-temperature exam conditions, referenced family vulnerabilities in a coercive context, drafted a candidate-specific irregularity note before the incident existed, and prepared strategic notes anticipating performance decline due to fatigue. The report also found the exam room temperature management inadequate and ordered a broader safety review. That last part mattered. Revenge would have stopped at Mrs. Vale. Justice opened the windows for everyone else. The scholarship announcement happened the next morning in the assembly room, not the overheated exam gallery. Portable fans lined the walls now, humming with suspicious sudden confidence. Professor Lale stood at the front with Mr. Harrow beside her. The Aurelia Civic Scholarship recognizes public reasoning grounded in practical reality, she said. This year's winning candidate identified that heat policy cannot be reduced to digital communication when physical safety is at stake. She also preserved her approved hydration accommodation under improper pressure. My mother began crying before my name. Mara whispered, "Bottle girl," and my father quietly told her that sounded like a superhero with bad branding. The 2026 Aurelia Civic Scholar is Candidate 51, Nina Ardent. I walked to the front holding the water bottle because Mr. Harrow had returned it to me in a clear sleeve, blue seal broken only where I had opened it to drink. Professor Lale handed me the certificate, the climate resilience placement letter, and a copy of the hydration log. "Keep this," she said. "Policy begins with bodies." I nearly lost it then, because that was what the first life had denied. My body had been treated as a weakness, a complication, a self-managed inconvenience. This time it was evidence. Mrs. Vale resigned from Scholarship Welfare Coordination before the board completed the full review. Officially, she stepped back to restore confidence in student support procedures. Unofficially, her hands had trembled over a draft form proving she planned to make my safety look voluntary and disposable. Bellwether changed the rules. Hydration accommodations could be altered only by external supervisors. Room temperature logs triggered mandatory cooling measures. Staff with relatives in a final could not manage welfare accommodations, and no student could be asked to empty an approved bottle for presentation or scanning reasons. Boring reforms. Beautiful reforms. Every future water bottle became harder to pour away. Isabel found me outside the library 3 weeks later. She looked different without her mother's calm arranged around her. Less polished. More tired. "I'm sorry," she said.
No hello.
Maybe she knew there was no elegant way to enter the conversation. "For knowing?" I asked. She swallowed. "For benefiting."
Honest. Ugly.
Useful. I told myself heat affected everyone. It doesn't affect everyone equally. "I know. Do you?" She looked down. I didn't.
Not really.
I thought accommodations were extra help. Then in the review, when Mum's notes said self-managed, I realized she was trying to turn your need into your fault. She looked at me. I should have said something before. Yes. The word was not soft. It did not need to be. "I'm trying to learn," she said. "Then start by not calling safety advantage." She nodded. "I won't." We did not become friends. But months later, during a student council meeting, I watched Isabel argue that exam rooms needed temperature limits written into policy, not left to reasonable discretion. Her voice shook.
She kept going.
"Growth is sometimes a girl becoming useful after being unbearable." The scholarship changed my family first in practical ways. Tuition cleared. My mother stopped taking the extra catering shifts at Bellwether, which pleased all of us because their kitchen manager treated staff like serving trays. Mara's literacy support moved through an external program after Professor Lale wrote a letter that used the phrase avoidable administrative delay like a hammer. My father bought a proper insulated bottle for each of us and labeled mine "Do not empty for anyone in pearls," which my mother said was too specific and therefore probably fair. We kept the original clear bottle on the kitchen shelf for months, still sealed in its evidence sleeve, until Mara put a tiny paper cape on it and called it Captain Hydration. We let her. The climate resilience placement taught me that my exam story was not dramatic. It was common. Heat deaths happen in policy gaps. In rooms where people assume advice can replace infrastructure. In forms that ask whether someone has access to cooling, without asking whether they can afford transport. In schools that call water a spill risk before they call 32 degrees a safety issue. In workplaces where breaks exist on paper, but not in the rhythm of the shift. I learned to write policies with water in them, shade in them, chairs in them, transport in them. Public buildings open late. Outreach teams. Temperature triggers. Accountability when warnings are sent but doors remain locked. My final section, E, became the first draft of the work I would do for years. The sports center heat evacuation from my first life did not kill me in the second. Because I recognized the swollen emergency door during a summer exam audit, I refused to sign off on the venue until the door was repaired. The side gate key was mounted in a break glass box. Water stations were placed along the evacuation route, and temperature triggers were linked to postponement rules. The venue manager said I was overreacting. I asked him whether he wanted to write students may faint near locked exit, but probably not on the risk assessment. He repaired the door. On the day I once died, the heat wave still came. The alarm still triggered after a power fault. The side gate opened. Students exited into shaded assembly zones with water. Nobody collapsed in the corridor. Nobody shouted for a key. Nothing happened except sweating, complaints, and survival. I have learned to love boring survival. I saw Mrs. Vale years later at an education well-being conference. Of course, she had reappeared. People like her rarely vanish. They become consultants in the language of care. Her session was called Resilience in High-Stakes Assessment. I did not attend because my tolerance for irony had temperature limits, but she approached me near the water station. Older, still elegant, still wearing pearls. She reached for a paper cup, and I noticed her fingers shake slightly before she steadied them. "Mina Arden," she said, "your heat policy work is very respected. It came from experience." Her smile tightened. That exam was difficult for everyone. Not equally. I was concerned about booklet integrity. You were concerned I would finish strong. Her hand tightened around the cup. Water trembled against the rim. Isabel suffered after that. Isabel learned safety is not advantage. You are still unforgiving. No, I said. I am still hydrated. She looked away first. Behind her, the conference water station had a sign, "Please keep lids on bottles in session rooms." I almost laughed. Context is everything. My mother eventually opened a small school lunch, forms, and study support counter near the community center. She called it capped because our family had abandoned subtlety for practical symbolism. She sold water bottles, lunch containers, labeled folders, exam kits, electrolyte sachets, and printed checklists for students with accommodations. My father built a shelf shaped like a little cooling center. Mara designed the logo, a clear bottle with a blue cap and lightning bolts. On the wall above the counter, my mother painted, "Do not pour out the thing keeping you well." Students came in embarrassed about needing water, medication, breaks, snacks, quiet rooms, extra time, tinted paper. My mother would say, "Need is not misconduct.
Sit down.
Let's label it properly." Now, when I train schools on assessment safety, I begin with the bottle. Not because water solves everything, but because it reveals the room's ethics quickly. Who is allowed to drink? Who has to prove thirst? Who decides when enough is enough? Is safety treated as a right, or as an exception granted until someone important dislikes how it looks? A capped bottle is not clutter. It is a small agreement between body and system. I will do the work, and you will not make preventable harm part of the test. The simple version is true. I was reborn. I kept my water bottle capped. She told me to empty it. Her hands trembled. But the simple version cannot hold the blue seal around the cap. The first life sound of water rushing down the side sink. Mr. Harrow saying the room temperature was the larger concern. Isabel admitting her mother expected me to fade. My mother in her catering apron staring down a welfare coordinator. Or Mrs. Vale's fingers tapping against the clipboard as the draft form turned her care into evidence. It cannot hold the girl who poured away safety because an adult made a capped bottle sound dangerous. It cannot hold the woman who learned that dehydration is not discipline and endurance is not fairness. If someone ever stands beside your desk and tells you to empty the bottle, throw away the snack, remove the aid, skip the break, surrender the support, or prove you can perform without the thing keeping your body steady, do not pour it out to look easy.
Call the supervisor.
Show the approval. Keep the cap on when you are not drinking and drink when you need to. Ask why your safety makes them uncomfortable. Let the record show the room temperature before anyone grades your resilience. And if her hands tremble when the log reveals she planned for you to fade, do not call it revenge. Call it welfare integrity. Keep the water bottle capped. Take the sip. Finish the answer.